The first Wargames was pretty awesome, totally new. The second Wargames introduced some interesting stuff, but really could be best described as now with airplanes. Red Dragon of all the series is the least functional. It had a half-hearted Navy layer added that was so comically broken that it was more or less left unchanged after it was terminally broken in the beta. There's such a lack of focus. While there are thousands of units, only maybe a few dozen are actually relevant, and frequently they're represented by marginal quality models clearly done by the lowest bidder. Worse, the developer itself refuses to change models that are 100% wrong or of entirely substandard quality because someone on their forums hurt their feelings once. Please note, the last statement is entirely 100% true. They call the no updated models thing the UGBEAR policy after said poster. In terms of gameplay, it goes more or less like the following. 1. Single player. Terrible. It's your more or less bog-standard skirmish maps arrayed in a sequence, with a tissue paper-thin strategic level. The AI is frankly too moronic to do anything but drive towards things, which it will do with gusto. The key to any mission is successfully destroying whatever blob the AI has summoned forth before it destroys whatever much smaller blob you were allocated for the mission. Then pair this with some really stupid choices in terms of campaign design. Fact? Did you know South Korea's defense hinges on French and German intervention? And just how many damn times you'll fight on the same map, doing the same thing, with the same units against the same total lack of objectives, except destroy tanks. And it's really quite telling how few folks play single player more than a few missions. Which is rather a shame, as the campaigns in the first Wargame were quite well put together, with challenging missions featuring a wide variety of objectives and terrain. Additional caveats. A. This is the least Asian game to be set in Asia since video games were made. You basically have two terrain types, Europe with pagodas or the American Southwest with pagodas. These two terrain types represent everything from the Russian Far East to Tokyo. B. Again, despite being a game oriented on events in Asia, most of the effort went into making the European countries in the game larger and more full of weirdo stuff that never actually reached service. The Asian factions, the ones that you would think would command some attention in a game called Red Dragon, are very poorly realized and hardly worth playing. The Chinese forces are a curious mix of equipment China never had, and total exclusion of several key systems they used extensively. The Anzac formations are pure crap, and the North Korean force, which arguably is pretty central to a game that spends so much time in Korea, is terrible. Not gameplay terrible, but poorly researched, poorly realized, and ultimately best skipped. Multiplayer. The best way to describe it is whatever broken cheesy tactic of the month on a loop. MRLS-type rockets are powerful this week. Stand by for rocket swarms, all match and nothing else. Super cheap planes spammed out, it's going to be raining planes for a few days. Somehow crappy bottom-tier infantry becomes way too cost-effective. Waves of mans forever. You'll note a recurring theme. It's not even like the heavy tank shuffle, or some other weird tactic just works really well. From the first Wargame to the last, most of your games start with a spammy spam rush or artillery spam and end with the same. It's all right if you're playing with a friend or folks you know aren't douches, but public matches are an exercise in pulling your own teeth out. Which ties into a few subtopics on multiplayer. A. There's only a handful of good maps, which is to say, ones that are not broken, unbalanced, etc., and you'll play on all those maps within the first day of playing the game more than once. It gets old fast. Many of the maps are boring, like imagine a flat open field. Put a river through it. Add some trees. Congrats! I just described several of the maps you'll be playing on. 3. Eugen is a terrible company. Here's things they do okay. You do not have to pay for any of their DLC. Wargame's EE was pretty good. As far as I can tell, none of them are terrorists. Here's things that make them marginal. They do not deliver on promised features, and then have really bad excuses why it's your fault those features do not exist. Examples. A. Red Dragon was promised to have sufficient ships to fully flesh out the smaller combatants of all the factions that had navies. This is several times over not the case. If you want to play naval stuff, which you shouldn't do anyway because it's pretty terrible, as NATO Your Force is an all-nations dream team of Japanese, French, and really, skip the American and British stuff because it's not like either of those countries had navies anyway, and are represented by a bad frigate and a not really used in number missile boat and a terrible frigate respectively. B. A map pack was promised with the last major patch. It was claimed the maps were being withheld because, well, either to give the dev team more time to work on fixing a huge exploit that went more or less unfixed for a month or so, or because we're sinners and don't deserve maps, I guess. Either way, the maps have never shown up, and asking about them on the game's forums will get you either banned or, at the least, the thread locked without comment. C. Think of it like this. You know those Twilight Zone episodes where the guy finds a genie in a lamp and he gets his wishes, but the wishes are some jacked up, terrible version of what he wished for? That's UGen, in a nutshell. Folks who played mostly U.S. forces were concerned that, oddly enough, despite the USAF being the largest air force in the world, it's having some major issues with air-to-air combat. UGen's fix to this was to add in the Patriot missile system, which did not fix the U.S.'s lackluster air-to-air capabilities, but did totally break the rest of the Air Force part of the game, as now there was a SAM site that could shoot down things over half the map. Broken part broken, and new game-breaking element added in for giggles. Their community manager is pretty much the biggest troll on their forums. You have a problem with how things are balanced? Han, you watch too many movies? You say something unkind about France? He's going to be as insulting as he can get away with, and then get you banned if you say so much as anything, but state a devout love of frog legs and terrible movies full of NY. Things stay broken for reasons known only to God. You can shoot down helicopters in this game with artillery. Like seriously, here's Mr. Helicopter hovering along, and oh no, indirect fire! Helicopter is dead. This is stupid. This is also the reality of the game since the first one. This has never been fixed or addressed. This is also but one of several broke features that have remained with Wargames since 2011 or so. You get some vague answer about the engine cannot handle it, but that's a bit like saying the Ford Pinto is designed in a way that causes it to catch fire, so drive safe, versus fixing it when you make a new one. I really could go on. I'm still annoyed enough when I see this game on my list, though. This really is not the game for you. If you want a good RTS, there are plenty of better ones out there. If you want a good Cold War game, God, avoid this mess. It's pretty much like if Tom Clancy was a French and mildly mentally handicapped version of the Cold War. If you want realism, this game is just as much not for you. Perhaps you could instead try a nice game of chess?